Mother bear. Fainted in the middle of the road. The baby's tearful. Please stop traffic instantly. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Every bit of your support helps us create even more amazing stories for you. The morning sun painted golden streaks across Maple Valley Road, a quiet stretch that connected the small town of Pinewood to the neighboring countryside. Olivia Bennett pulled her blue sedan to the roadside, muttering under her breath as she noticed the flat tire. Her 18-month-old daughter, Lily, was strapped in her car seat, clutching her favorite stuffed bunny with droopy ears. "Just great," Olivia sighed, tucking a strand of chestnut hair behind her ear. She glanced at her phone. No signal. Of course. The one day she decided to take the scenic route to her mother's house, something like this would happen. "Hang tight, sweetie," she called to Lily as she rummaged through the trunk for the spare tire. "Mommy just needs to fix something real quick." Lily babbled happily in response, completely unaware of their predicament. Olivia worked quickly, loosening the lug nuts on the flat tire while keeping an eye on her daughter through the rear window. The morning was peaceful. Birds chirping, wildflowers swaying in the gentle breeze, the distant rumble of occasional traffic. As Olivia struggled with the jack, she didn't notice Lily wiggling out of her improperly fastened car seat. The toddler, drawn by the colorful butterflies dancing outside her window, managed to unlock the door. Her tiny feet touched the dewy grass, and she giggled at the ticklish sensation. Meanwhile, on the other side of the road, a massive silhouette emerged from the forest edge. A brown bear, fur matted and movement sluggish, stumbled toward the asphalt. Her eyes were glazed, her breathing labored. Something was terribly wrong. The magnificent creature took a few more unsteady steps before collapsing right in the middle of the road with a heavy thud. Olivia, still focused on the tire, hadn't noticed either her daughter's escape or the fallen bear. The sound of an approaching truck caught her attention, and she glanced up just in time to see the driver swerve dramatically, narrowly missing the prone form of the bear. "What the?" she muttered, standing up to get a better view. Her heart nearly stopped when she spotted Lily, toddling toward the road, her stuffed bunny dragging behind her. "Lily!" Olivia screamed, dropping the tire iron with a clatter. She sprinted toward her daughter, but Lily had already spotted the bear and was moving with surprising speed toward the animal, driven by innocent curiosity. Traffic began to build as more vehicles approached the scene. A red pickup screeched to a halt, its driver leaning on the horn. A minivan swerved onto the shoulder. A motorcyclist skidded sideways, barely keeping his balance. Within minutes, a small traffic jam had formed, with frustrated drivers shouting and honking. No one dared to approach the bear. Even in its weakened state, a wild bear was dangerous. But Lily, innocent and fearless, continued her determined journey across the grass toward the fallen animal. Her tiny face creased with concern as she watched the bear's chest heaving with each labored breath. Olivia ran faster than she ever had in her life, her heart thundering in her chest. But she was too far away. The distance between her and Lily seemed to stretch impossibly as her daughter reached the edge of the road, just feet away from the massive predator. "Someone stop that child!" a woman shouted from her car. A man in a business suit half opened his door but froze, unwilling to put himself at risk. The bear's eyes fluttered, sensing movement nearby. Lily paused at the edge of the asphalt, her innocent eyes taking in the suffering creature before her. Something in the child's heart understood the bear's pain. Tears welled up in her big blue eyes, spilling down her chubby cheeks. And then, as a truck driver began to edge forward, intending to drive around the obstacle, Lily did something that would change everything. She stepped onto the road and planted her tiny feet firmly in front of the fallen bear. With tears streaming down her face, she spread her small arms wide as if to protect the suffering animal. The stuffed bunny fell from her grasp, landing next to the bear's massive paw. The truck's brakes squealed as the driver slammed the pedal to the floor. Cars behind it jolted to a stop. The entire roadway fell silent as everyone stared at the unbelievable scene before them. A tiny, tearful child standing guard over a fallen bear. Lily's quiet sniffles carried across the suddenly still landscape. Her little shoulders shook with each sob. It wasn't a tantrum or a cry of fear. It was genuine compassion. A child's pure empathy for another creature's suffering. Time seemed to stand still as the bear's massive form trembled with each breath, and the tiny human guardian stood unwavering, tears glistening in the morning sunlight. In that moment, something changed in every person who witnessed the scene. The frustration of delayed journeys evaporated. The fear of the wild animal transformed into concern. Lily's tearful plea, without a single word spoken, had penetrated every heart present. Olivia finally reached her daughter, scooping her up with trembling arms. "Lily," she whispered, her voice breaking with fear and relief. "Oh my God, Lily." But even in her mother's embrace, Lily's eyes remained fixed on the bear, her tiny hand reaching out toward the suffering animal. She uttered a single word, her voice small but clear. "Hurt." The crowd, once paralyzed by indecision, began to move. A woman in scrubs emerged from her car, medical bag in hand. "I'm a veterinarian," she called, approaching cautiously. "This bear needs help immediately." A man in a park ranger uniform pushed through the gathered onlookers. "I've called Wildlife Rescue," he announced. "They're on their way. She appears to be severely dehydrated, possibly poisoned." As the professionals took control of the situation, the gathered crowd formed a protective circle around the scene. Traffic was redirected by volunteers. Someone brought bottled water. Another person retrieved a tarp from their trunk to provide shade from the increasingly warm sun. The stuffed bunny remained where it had fallen, nestled against the bear's paw like a small guardian. Wildlife Rescue arrived 20 minutes later, their van equipped with equipment to safely move the massive animal. As they worked to stabilize the bear, the veterinarian discovered something that explained everything. A tranquilizer dart embedded in the bear's shoulder, likely from poachers who had failed to track her after shooting. "She wandered here in her confusion," the vet explained. "It's a miracle she made it this far without collapsing sooner. Another hour and she wouldn't have survived." As the rescue team prepared to transport the bear, Lily wiggled in her mother's arms, pointing insistently at her stuffed bunny still lying near the bear. "Leave it, sweetie," Olivia whispered. "We can get you a new one." But Lily's face crumpled again, fresh tears threatening to spill over. One of the wildlife rescuers noticed and gently retrieved the toy, brushing it off before handing it back to the little girl. "Your daughter may have saved this bear's life," he told Olivia. "If traffic had continued, if no one had stopped to help." Lily clutched her bunny tight as the bear was carefully loaded into the rescue vehicle. The crowd applauded spontaneously, a release of emotion after the tense situation. Before the doors closed, Lily raised her tiny hand and waved. "Bye-bye, bear," she said softly. As the rescue van pulled away, people lingered, exchanging contact information and promising to check on the bear's recovery. Strangers who might have passed each other without a glance now spoke like old friends, bound by the extraordinary experience they had shared. Olivia carried Lily back to their car, where a kind mechanic had finished changing her tire. As they prepared to continue their journey, a local news reporter approached, asking for an interview about the remarkable incident. She didn't do anything extraordinary, Olivia said, looking at her daughter with new eyes. She just did what we all should do. She saw suffering and couldn't ignore it. The story spread far beyond Maple Valley Road. The bear and the baby became a symbol of compassion that transcended language and borders. The Wildlife Center provided regular updates on the mother bear's recovery, and donations poured in to support their work. And little Lily, too young to understand her impact, simply held her bunny a little tighter each night, sometimes whispering, "Bear, okay," before drifting off to sleep. Sometimes the smallest among us teach the greatest lessons, that courage wears many forms, and that compassion, even wordless, has the power to stop the world in its tracks. 3 weeks later, the Bennett household buzzed with activity. Olivia's phone rang constantly with interview requests, and her email inbox overflowed with messages from around the world. The local newspaper had published the story with a photo of Lily clutching her stuffed bunny, and it had gone viral overnight. Television crews parked outside their modest home, hoping to capture a glimpse of the bear guardian, as Lily was now called. "This is getting out of hand," Olivia muttered to her sister Rachel, who had come to help manage the sudden attention. "I just want our normal life back." Rachel nodded, peeking through the curtains at the news van outside. Fame has its price. But think about all the good that's coming from this. The Wildlife Center raised over $50,000 already. Olivia sighed, watching Lily play in the corner, blissfully unaware of her celebrity status. The toddler had been having nightmares since the incident, waking up crying and calling for the hurt bear. Olivia wondered if the trauma of that day had affected her daughter more deeply than she initially thought. "The bear's doing better," Rachel said, scrolling through her phone. The center posted an update this morning. They named her Hope. She turned the screen toward Olivia, showing a photo of the recovering bear, now alert and eating. Olivia smiled faintly. "That's good. At least something positive came from all this." The doorbell rang, making both sisters jump. Rachel peeked through the peephole and groaned. "Another reporter." "Tell them we're not interested," Olivia said firmly. She'd given one brief interview to the local news and regretted it immediately. The story had been sensationalized, portraying Lily as some kind of miracle child with a supernatural connection to animals. But when Rachel opened the door, it wasn't a reporter standing there. It was a tall man in a park ranger uniform, his expression serious. "Ms. Bennett, I'm Ranger Daniel Crawford from the Department of Wildlife Conservation. May I come in? It's about the bear." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. "Is something wrong? Did she—" "She's recovering well," Daniel assured her quickly. "But there's been a development you should know about." Once inside, Daniel declined the offered coffee and got straight to the point. "When we rescued the bear, Hope, we discovered she wasn't just poisoned. She had recently given birth." Olivia gasped. "She has cubs?" Daniel nodded gravely. "We believe so. We've been searching the area where she was likely darted, but haven't found them yet. Cubs this young, without their mother." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Lily toddled over, perhaps sensing the tension in the room. She tugged at Daniel's pant leg, looking up with wide, curious eyes. "Bear?" she asked hopefully. Daniel knelt down to her level. "Yes, sweetie. We're talking about the bear you helped." Lily's face lit up. She ran to her toy corner and returned with her stuffed bunny, thrusting it toward Daniel. "Bear like bunny," she stated confidently. Something about the child's certainty made Daniel pause. He studied the worn toy, then looked at Olivia. "Has she been talking much about the bear?" Olivia nodded. "She has nightmares. Keeps saying the bear is sad, calling for her babies." Rachel rolled her eyes. "It's just a toddler processing a scary event. Don't read too much into it," But Daniel wasn't so quick to dismiss it. Children often notice things adults miss, and animals in distress sometimes seek out human help, especially when their young are threatened. He hesitated, then added, "I know this sounds strange, but would you be willing to bring Lily to the location where we think the bear was darted? She might notice something we've overlooked." "You want to use my daughter as some kind of bear cub detector?" Olivia asked incredulously. "That's crazy." "I understand your concern," Daniel said, "but we're running out of time for those cubs, and sometimes the most extraordinary solutions come from the most unexpected sources." Rachel placed a hand on her sister's arm. "Liv, what if he's right? What if Lily could help? You said yourself there was something special about how she responded to that bear." Olivia looked at her daughter, who was now making her bunny hop across the floor, singing a nonsense song. The incident on the road had been frightening enough. Did she really want to expose Lily to more potential trauma? But then Lily looked up, her innocent eyes meeting her mother's, and said with perfect clarity, "Help bear babies, Mommy." They crying. A chill ran down Olivia's spine. How could Lily know about the cubs? No one had mentioned them in her presence. Daniel's radio crackled, breaking the tense silence. He answered it, his expression growing more troubled with each word from the dispatcher. "What is it?" Olivia asked when he finished. "Poachers," he said grimly. "They've been spotted again in the North Woods. We think they're after the cubs. Bear cubs can fetch thousands on the black market." Olivia felt something shift inside her. The thought of those helpless cubs, perhaps listening for their mother's return, being captured by the same people who had harmed her. Something hardened in her resolve. "When do we leave?" she asked quietly. Daniel looked relieved. "As soon as possible, every hour counts." Rachel stared at her sister. "Olivia, you can't be serious. This isn't your fight." But Olivia was already gathering Lily's things, a jacket, some snacks, her sippy cup. "It became my fight the moment my daughter stood between that bear and certain death," she said firmly. "I can't explain why, but I think Lily is connected to this somehow. And if there's even a small chance she can help save those cubs, we have to try." Daniel helped them prepare for the trek into the woods. The area was about an hour's drive from their home, followed by a moderate hike. He assured Olivia that they would have a full team with them. Other rangers, a wildlife veterinarian, and a tracking expert. As they packed up Daniel's SUV, a black sedan pulled into the driveway. A woman in an expensive suit emerged, her high heels unsuitable for the gravel. "Ms. Bennett," she called. "I'm Alexandra Winters from Global Network News. We'd like to offer you an exclusive interview package. The world wants to hear your daughter's story." Olivia didn't slow down. "Not interested," she said curtly. Alexandra persisted, following them to the car. "We're prepared to offer a substantial amount. College fund for your daughter, perhaps?" Daniel stepped between them. "Miss Winters, we're on official wildlife conservation business. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." The reporter's eyes narrowed. "What's going on here? Is there more to this story?" She pulled out her phone, beginning to record. "Is something happening with the bear?" Rachel intervened, steering the persistent reporter away while Olivia secured Lily in her car seat. But the damage was done. Alexandra Winters had sensed a new angle to the story, and she wasn't likely to let it go. As they drove away, Olivia glanced back at the reporter, who was already on her phone, likely calling in the new development to her network. "Will she be a problem?" Olivia asked Daniel. He grimaced. "Probably. The media can complicate wildlife operations, especially when poachers are involved. They might inadvertently tip them off to the cubs' location if they find out." Lily, oblivious to their concerns, hugged her bunny, and gazed out the window, occasionally pointing at birds or interesting trees. Her innocence was a stark contrast to the tension building inside the vehicle. The SUV climbed steadily into the hills, the terrain growing more rugged. Cell phone reception became spotty, then disappeared altogether. The forest closed in around them, ancient trees blocking out much of the sunlight. "We're almost to the search area," Daniel said, turning onto a narrow dirt road. "The team should be waiting for us at the ranger station." As they rounded a bend, Olivia gasped. Instead of the expected ranger vehicles, they found the road blocked by a black pickup truck. 2 men in hunting gear stood beside it, rifles casually held at their sides. Daniel slowed the SUV, his right hand moving subtly toward his service weapon. "Stay in the car," he instructed quietly. "Lock the doors if I get out." "Who are they?" Olivia whispered, instinctively reaching back to touch Lily's leg. "Not rangers," Daniel replied grimly, "and not legal hunters, judging by their equipment." The men approached the vehicle, their expressions hard and unwelcoming. Olivia's heart raced as she realized that their rush to save the bear cubs had led them straight into danger. "Wildlife Department," Daniel called out through his partially lowered window, his voice casual but authoritative. "Everything all right, gentlemen?" The taller of the 2 men, with a weathered face and a jagged scar across his chin, leaned down to peer into the SUV. His gaze lingered on Olivia, then shifted to Lily in the back seat. His eyes narrowed. "Road's closed," he said flatly. "Wash out ahead, you'll need to turn around." Daniel nodded pleasantly, though Olivia could see the tension in his jaw. "Appreciate the warning, but we're heading to the ranger station just a quarter-mile up. Department vehicle," he added, gesturing to the logo on the door. "We can make it through." The second man, shorter but more muscular, with a thick beard and cold eyes, joined his companion. "No, you can't. Bridge is completely gone. We just came from there." Olivia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. Daniel had told her the ranger station was accessible only by this road. If these men had truly come from that direction, what had they been doing there? "Strange," Daniel replied evenly. "I was just speaking with the station. They didn't mention any bridge problems." The scarred man's friendly facade slipped for just a moment, revealing something dangerous beneath. "Reception's spotty up here. Maybe they couldn't get through." Inside the SUV, Lily suddenly became agitated. "Bad men," she whispered, clutching her bunny tighter. "Bad men hurt bears." Olivia quickly shushed her, but the damage was done. Both men had heard the child's words, and their expressions hardened. "Cute kid," the bearded man said, his smile not reaching his eyes. "What's she talking about?" Daniel shifted in his seat, and Olivia noticed his hand was now resting openly on his service weapon. "You know how kids are. Big imaginations. Now, if you'll excuse us, we need to get to the station." The scarred man placed his hand on the door, his thumb strategically positioned over the lock button. "What's your business up at the station, Ranger?" Not often you see official vehicles bringing women and babies into restricted areas. Before Daniel could answer, the radio in the men's truck crackled to life. A voice, partially obscured by static, called out urgently, "Got them cornered in the North Ravine. Need backup now. These little... putting up a fight." The bearded man sprinted back to silence the radio, but it was too late. The message confirmed what Daniel and Olivia already suspected. These men were with the poachers, and they had located the bear cubs. Daniel's demeanor changed instantly. "Step away from the vehicle, sir. Now." The scarred man's friendly pretense evaporated. He reached for something in his jacket, but Daniel was faster. In one fluid motion, he drew his weapon and pointed it through the window. "Department of Wildlife Conservation. Hands where I can see them. Both of you." The second man had already drawn his rifle, pointing it toward the SUV. "You're outnumbered, Ranger," he snarled. "There are 6 of us in these woods. Drop your weapon or—" What happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Lily, perhaps sensing the danger, let out a piercing wail. Not a typical child's cry, but something primitive and raw that raised the hair on Olivia's arms. At the same moment, a deep, guttural roar echoed through the forest, so powerful it seemed to shake the very ground beneath them. The men froze, eyes wide with fear. "That's impossible," the bearded man whispered. "The mother's at the rescue center. We made sure of it." Another roar, closer this time, followed by the sound of underbrush being crushed beneath heavy paws. "Drive!" Olivia screamed at Daniel. "Now!" Daniel didn't hesitate. He slammed the SUV into reverse, tires spinning on the dirt road as he executed a rapid 3-point turn. The scarred man lunged for the door handle but missed as the vehicle lurched backward. Gunshots rang out, one bullet shattering the side mirror. As they sped back down the road, Olivia twisted in her seat to check on Lily. The child was eerily calm now, looking out the window with intense focus. "Bear's coming," she said softly. "Bear's helping." Daniel radioed for backup as he drove, reporting the armed poachers and their location. "We need immediate assistance. Shots fired at a department vehicle with civilians aboard." "What about the cubs?" Olivia asked, her voice shaking with residual fear and adrenaline. "Did you hear that transmission?" Daniel replied grimly. "They found them in the North Ravine, and they're putting up a fight, which means the cubs are still alive. We can't just leave them." "We're not," Daniel assured her, taking a sharp turn onto an even narrower path that Olivia hadn't noticed before. "This is an old fire road. It connects to the main road farther up, past where those men were blocking us. It's rough terrain, but it'll get us to the ravine." He glanced at her seriously. "But I need to know you understand the danger. Those men are armed and desperate. They've already shown they're willing to shoot at us." Olivia looked back at Lily, who was now humming softly to her bunny, seemingly undisturbed by the chaos. Something about her daughter's strange calmness strengthened her resolve. "I understand, but that roar, what was that? It couldn't have been Hope, could it? She's still at the rescue center, right?" Daniel's expression was troubled. "Yes, she is." "I checked this morning." He hesitated. "There's been no report of another adult bear in this immediate area, which means—" "What?" "I don't know," he admitted. "But whatever it was, it scared those poachers. And right now, I'll take any help we can get." The fire road lived up to Daniel's warning. It was barely more than a trail, overgrown in places and washed out in others. The SUV bounced and lurched, forcing them to slow to a crawl in some spots. Olivia's nerves were frayed, every distant sound making her flinch, imagining the poachers finding them again. Lily, however, seemed to grow more animated the deeper they ventured into the forest. She pointed excitedly at seemingly random trees and rocks, babbling in her toddler language with occasional clear words, "close" and "bear, babies crying." After 15 tense minutes, they emerged onto the main road again, well past the roadblock. Daniel immediately accelerated, heading toward the coordinates he had overheard in the poacher's transmission. "The North Ravine is just ahead," he explained. "It's a steep valley with a small stream at the bottom. Difficult terrain, which might be why the cubs have evaded capture so far." As they approached, Daniel pulled off the road, concealing the SUV behind a thick stand of pines. "We go on foot from here. Stay close to me." He reached into the back seat, retrieving a small backpack. Basic emergency gear, he explained, slinging it over his shoulder, including a first aid kit, which I hope we won't need. What's the plan? Olivia asked, lifting Lily from her car seat. Backup is still at least 30 minutes out. We locate the cubs without being seen, then wait for reinforcements. Olivia nodded, settling Lily on her hip. The toddler squirmed, clearly wanting to be put down. No, sweetie, Olivia whispered. You need to stay with Mommy. It's not safe. Find bears, Lily insisted, pointing deeper into the woods. Daniel checked his weapon, then led them along a narrow trail that descended toward the ravine. They moved as quietly as possible, freezing at every snap of a twig or rustle of leaves. The forest was unnaturally silent. No bird calls, no chattering squirrels. Even the insects seemed hushed, as if the entire ecosystem was holding its breath. The path grew steeper, forcing them to slow their pace. Olivia's arms ached from carrying Lily, who was still struggling to be put down. Just as she was about to ask Daniel for a break, they heard voices ahead, rough, angry voices, punctuated by occasional thuds and metallic clangs. Daniel signaled for absolute silence, then crept forward to peer through a screen of foliage. Olivia followed, keeping low. What they saw made her blood run cold. In a small clearing at the bottom of the ravine, 3 men surrounded a crude cage. Inside, 2 tiny bear cubs, no larger than puppies, huddled together, their dark eyes wide with fear. One of the men jabbed at them with a stick whenever they came too close to the edge of the cage. Radio Johnson and tell him to bring the truck around, ordered a tall, lean man who seemed to be in charge. We need to move these 2 before the Rangers figure out what's happening. What about Blake and Harris? Asked another, a beefy man with a shaved head. They were supposed to keep the road clear. The leader spat on the ground. If they let anyone through, they'll answer to me. Now get moving. These cubs will fetch at least 20 grand each on the exotic pet market. 30 if we get them across the Canadian border. Olivia felt sick. She looked at Daniel, who was assessing the situation with narrowed eyes. 3 armed men, the cubs in a cage, and no backup yet. The odds weren't in their favor. But then Lily, who had been watching the scene with unusual intensity, suddenly stiffened in Olivia's arms. Before her mother could tighten her grip, the toddler wriggled free and did the unthinkable. She stood up and shouted at the top of her tiny lungs, "Bad men! Leave bears alone!" The poachers whirled around, weapons raised. Daniel cursed under his breath, immediately stepping in front of Olivia and Lily, his own weapon drawn. "Wildlife Conservation Department," he shouted. "Drop your weapons." For a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then one of the poachers fired, the bullet splintering the tree beside Daniel's head. He returned fire, forcing the men to dive for cover. "Run," Daniel commanded Olivia. "Take Lily and get back to the vehicle." But retreat was impossible. The leader of the poachers had circled behind them, cutting off their escape route. He emerged from the trees, rifle aimed directly at Olivia and Lily. "Nobody move," he said coldly. "Drop the gun, Ranger, or the woman and kid are dead." Daniel had no choice. He carefully placed his weapon on the ground, raising his hands. The leader smiled, revealing tobacco-stained teeth. "Smart move. Now all of you. Down to the clearing." Slowly. As they were marched into the clearing, the cubs in the cage began making pitiful crying sounds, almost like human infants. The sound broke Olivia's heart. Lily stared at them, tears filling her eyes. "Bear baby's sad," she whispered. "Want mama? Shut the kid up," snapped the leader, now examining Daniel's badge and radio. He turned to his companions. "Change of plans. We've got a ranger and witnesses. No choices left now." The implications of his words sent ice through Olivia's veins. These men couldn't afford to leave witnesses. She clutched Lily tighter, mind racing desperately for a way out of this nightmare. The bald poacher approached, eyeing them coldly. "What do we do with them, Sean?" The leader, Sean, considered for a moment. "Take them deeper in, make it look like a bear attack, ironic considering why they're here." He laughed humorlessly. Lily suddenly went rigid in Olivia's arms. Her small face took on an expression of intense concentration that seemed almost alien on a toddler. She turned her head slowly, looking upward toward the ridge overlooking the ravine. Following her daughter's gaze, Olivia gasped. Standing at the edge of the ravine, silhouetted against the sky, was an enormous black bear, far larger than Hope had been. Its eyes gleamed with unnatural intelligence as it surveyed the scene below. Behind it, 2 more bears emerged from the forest. One brown, one cinnamon-colored, both equally massive. The poachers hadn't noticed yet, still arguing about how to dispose of their prisoners. But Daniel had seen. His eyes met Olivia's, a silent question passing between them. Lily raised one small hand toward the bears and whispered, "Help now." As if responding to her command, the black bear reared up on its hind legs and released a roar that shook leaves from the trees. The other bears joined in, creating a terrifying chorus that echoed through the ravine. The poachers spun around, their faces draining of color. "What the hell?" Sean didn't finish his sentence. The bears charged down the steep slope with astonishing speed, moving with purpose and coordination that defied natural behavior. "Run!" screamed the bald poacher, abandoning his weapon as he fled. The others followed suit, scrambling in panic to escape the oncoming predators. Daniel seized the moment of chaos. He lunged for his weapon, then grabbed Olivia and Lily, pulling them behind a large boulder. "Stay down," he ordered. The bears ignored the humans behind the boulder, focusing their fury on the fleeing poachers. Sean, the leader, made it only a few yards before the black bear overtook him, knocking him to the ground with a single swipe. It didn't maul him, however. Instead, it stood over him, growling menacingly, keeping him pinned down. The other bears similarly cornered the remaining poachers against the ravine wall. It was as if the bears were deliberately capturing, not killing. "This is impossible," Daniel whispered, watching the scene unfold. "Bears don't hunt cooperatively like this. They don't strategize. This is more like wolf behavior, not bear." Lily, calm despite the chaos, pointed toward the cage where the cubs still huddled. "Help babies now," she said firmly. Daniel looked from the toddler to the captive bears, then to the adult bears holding the poachers at bay. Something extraordinary was happening, something beyond his scientific understanding. "Cover me," he told Olivia, handing her his radio. "If anything goes wrong, call for backup. They should be close by now." Before she could protest, Daniel slipped out from behind the boulder and approached the cage. The adult bears watched him, but made no move to interfere. With shaking hands, he unlatched the cage door, allowing the cubs to scamper out. They immediately ran to him, climbing his legs like they were tree trunks, seeking protection. The sight of a grown man with 2 bear cubs clinging to him might have been comical in any other circumstance. But as Daniel carefully returned to the boulder, cubs in arms, Olivia felt only wonder. "What now?" she asked, eyeing the adult bears that still had the poachers trapped. As if in answer, they heard the welcome sound of vehicles approaching from above. The backup Daniel had called for had finally arrived. Multiple rangers in tactical gear descended into the ravine, securing the stunned poachers one by one. And the 3 adult bears? As soon as the rangers appeared, they melted back into the forest as silently as they had come, vanishing so completely it was as if they had never been there at all. The rescued cubs, however, were very real. They sniffed curiously at Lily, who giggled and reached out to touch their soft fur. "Lily help bear babies," she said proudly. "Bears help Lily." One of the senior rangers approached them, his expression a mixture of relief and confusion. "Crawford, what the hell happened here? Those poachers are babbling about coordinated bear attacks. And where did these cubs come from?" Daniel looked at Olivia and Lily, then back at his colleague. "It's a long story, Chief, one I'm not sure you'd believe." As the rangers secured the scene and tended to the cubs, a wildlife veterinarian confirmed they were indeed Hope's offspring. 2 females, approximately 3 months old, malnourished but otherwise healthy. "They've been without their mother for weeks," the vet explained. "By all accounts, they shouldn't have survived this long in the wild. Something must have been providing for them." Or someone, Olivia thought, remembering the 3 adult bears that had appeared so mysteriously and acted so unnaturally. When they finally emerged from the forest hours later, the sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks. Reporters had somehow gotten wind of the operation and were gathered at the forest's edge, cameras at the ready. Alexandra Winters was at the front of the pack, her expensive suit now paired with sensible hiking boots. "Miss Bennett," she called out, pushing past a ranger attempting to establish a perimeter. "Is it true your daughter led authorities to illegally captured bear cubs? How did she know where to find them?" Daniel stepped in, shielding Olivia and Lily from the cameras. "No comment at this time. This is an ongoing investigation into a wildlife trafficking operation." But Olivia found herself pausing. Perhaps there was value in sharing this story, not for fame or money, but to highlight the importance of wildlife conservation and the connection between all living creatures that Lily had somehow tapped into. "I'll give one statement," she said quietly to Daniel, who looked surprised but nodded. Approaching the reporters with Lily in her arms, Olivia spoke clearly and confidently. "Today, my daughter reminded us all of something important, that compassion knows no boundaries, not age, not species. The world watched when she stood between a suffering bear and danger on that road 3 weeks ago. Today, she helped to save that bear's family. I don't know how she knew where to find them. I don't understand the connection she seems to have. But I know that if we all listened more closely to the innocent wisdom of children, their instinctive kindness and empathy, our world would be a better place for all creatures." Alexandra pushed forward. "But the bears. Witnesses report multiple adult bears coordinating to trap the poachers. That's unprecedented behavior. How do you explain that?" Olivia looked down at Lily, who was contentedly playing with her bunny, seemingly unaware of her role in the extraordinary events of the day. "I can't explain it," Olivia admitted. "Some things in this world remain mysteries. But I believe that kindness creates ripples we can't always see or understand. My daughter showed kindness to a suffering mother bear. Perhaps today that kindness came back to us in ways we never expected." As they drove away from the forest, leaving the reporters and rangers behind, Lily fell asleep in her car seat, her bunny clutched tightly in her small arms. Daniel, who had offered to drive them home, glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "The cubs will be reunited with Hope tomorrow," he said softly. "The rescue center believes it's best for their recovery." Olivia nodded, watching the passing landscape as twilight deepened into night. "And those men?" "Facing federal charges for wildlife trafficking, poaching, and attempted murder. They won't be threatening any more animals or people for a very long time." They drove in companionable silence for a while, both processing the impossible events they had witnessed. "You know," Daniel finally said, "in many indigenous cultures, there are stories about children with special connections to the natural world. Spirit children, they are sometimes called, bridges between humanity and the wild." Olivia looked back at her sleeping daughter. "Do you believe that's what Lily is?" Daniel smiled. "I'm a ranger and a scientist. I should say no." His expression grew thoughtful. "But after today, I don't know what to believe anymore, except that your daughter is extraordinary." As they approached Olivia's home, they noticed something unusual on the front lawn, a crude circle of small, colorful stones that hadn't been there that morning. "Did you do that?" Daniel asked, slowing the car. Olivia shook her head, a chill running through her that wasn't entirely unpleasant. "No, and neither did Rachel." They parked and approached the circle cautiously. The stones were arranged with deliberate precision. Too perfect to be random, too complex to be human mischief. "Bare paw prints," Daniel observed quietly, pointing to the ground around the circle. Clear tracks led from the forest edge to the stone circle and back again. Adult and cubs. "That's impossible," Olivia whispered, hoping her cubs are at the rescue center. Daniel knelt to examine the tracks more closely. "These weren't made by Hope." He pointed to the size comparison. "These are from much larger bears, like the ones we saw today." Lily stirred in Olivia's arms, blinking sleepily. When she saw the stone circle, she smiled and pointed. "Bear, thank you," she said simply, then rested her head on her mother's shoulder and drifted back to sleep. Olivia and Daniel exchanged glances, standing together in the gathering darkness, surrounded by evidence of something they could never explain but could never deny. Something that transcended the boundaries between the human world and the wild. Something that began with a child's tears for a suffering mother and ended with a circle of gratitude. Sometimes the smallest among us teach the greatest lessons, and sometimes those lessons come from places we least expect. The whispered wisdom of ancient forests, the silent understanding between species, and the pure, unfiltered compassion of a child's heart. In the weeks that followed, wildlife officers would report unusual bear behavior throughout the region. Mothers with cubs approaching campsites not to raid food, but to observe the children playing. Injured hikers being led to safety by bears that vanished when help arrived. Poachers finding their traps mysteriously triggered or dismantled. And in Olivia's backyard, fresh flowers would occasionally appear inside the stone circle, though no one ever saw who placed them there. Some mysteries are not meant to be solved, only witnessed and treasured. And some connections, once made, can never truly be broken. 5 years passed. Lily grew from a toddler into a bright, compassionate little girl of 6, with the same golden curls and penetrating blue eyes that seemed to see deeper into the world than most. The incident with the bears had faded from national headlines, but never from their lives. Olivia and Daniel had married 3 years after their shared adventure, brought together by an experience no one else could truly understand. Daniel had transferred to the local wildlife office to be closer to them, and their modest home at the edge of town had become a sanctuary of sorts, not just for them, but for injured wildlife that somehow found their way to their doorstep. The stone circle remained untouched in their backyard, now surrounded by wildflowers and sheltered by a small wooden gazebo Daniel had built. Lily visited it every morning and evening, sometimes leaving small treasures. A perfect pine cone, a colorful feather, a shiny stone, and sometimes finding similar gifts waiting for her. On the morning of Lily's 7th birthday, Olivia was preparing a special breakfast when Daniel called from the back door. "Liv, you need to see this," he said. his voice filled with wonder. Olivia joined him at the window. Lily was standing in her nightgown by the stone circle, the early morning mist swirling around her small form. She wasn't alone. At the edge of the woods stood a magnificent brown bear, larger than any Olivia had seen before. Beside her were two younger bears, nearly full-grown but still recognizable by the distinctive white patches on their chests. Hope and her cubs, now grown. Without fear, Lily approached them, her hand extended as if greeting old friends. The mother bear lowered her massive head, allowing the child to touch her fur. The younger bears circled Lily playfully, never touching her but moving with joyful recognition. "Should we—" Olivia began, but Daniel placed a gentle hand on her arm. "Watch," he whispered. From her pocket, Lily withdrew something small and worn, her beloved stuffed bunny, now faded and threadbare from years of love. With ceremonial care, she placed it in the center of the stone circle, then stepped back. The mother bear approached, sniffed the offering, and made a soft rumbling sound deep in her throat. Then, with surprising gentleness, she used her massive paw to push something toward Lily. A perfect pine cone, larger and more beautiful than any they had seen before. Tears welled in Olivia's eyes as she watched her daughter accept the gift with a solemn nod. Words weren't necessary. The exchange spoke volumes about a bond that transcended normal understanding. The bears stayed for only a few minutes before melting back into the forest. Lily stood watching them go, her small face serene and somehow ancient. When she returned to the house clutching the pine cone to her chest, Olivia knelt to embrace her. "Happy birthday, my brave girl," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. Lily smiled, her eyes twinkling with secret wisdom. "Mama, they said thank you again for helping them remember." "Remember what, sweetheart?" Daniel asked, kneeling beside them. Lily touched his cheek with gentle fingers. "That kindness is never forgotten. That love crosses all boundaries." She looked toward the forest where the bears had disappeared. "That we are all connected if we only remember how to listen." That evening, as birthday candles cast golden light across Lily's smiling face, Olivia caught Daniel's gaze across the table. In his eyes, she saw the same thought that filled her heart. They had been blessed with not just an extraordinary daughter, but a glimpse into the sacred bond between all living things. Outside, as night fell, soft bear prints appeared in the dewy grass around the stone circle, where a tattered stuffed bunny kept silent watch over the pine cone beside it, two treasures forming a bridge between worlds that most had forgotten how to cross. And somewhere in the forest, bears dreamed of a small human child who had once stood between them and harm, whose tears had saved them, and whose heart still called to theirs across the ancient divide between wilderness and civilization. In the years to come, many would visit their home seeking explanations for the strange harmony between the wild bears of the region and this one human family. Scientists would propose theories. Spiritualists would speak of old magic. Skeptics would dismiss it all as coincidence. But Lily, growing tall and wise beyond her years, would simply smile and lead them to the stone circle, where offerings were exchanged in the dawn light, where whispers crossed between worlds, and where the impossible became real through the purest force in nature, a love that asked for nothing in return. For in the end, it was never about explaining the miracle, but living within it. Not about understanding the mystery, but honoring it.